Hey, and welcome back to another video. And in this video, we're going to take a look at how we can write UI tests for our DetailView. Now, in our previous video, we took a look at how we can actually just write unit tests when our app loads. But if you actually look at our DetailView within our application, if I just load this up, you'll notice that when I tap on it, it actually pushes to a screen and loads information about a person. So what are we looking to actually test here? Well, what we want to do is we want to test to see if you push to a screen, does it show the correct information that you actually see here on the screen, so the correct text, as well as if it fails, do we actually get the correct type of error message on the screen as well? So let's actually do this now. So first of all, let's create another new folder within our UI tests, and we'll just call this details. And then we'll create a new UI test file called details UI test. Cool, sweet. So now let's actually set up our, setup and tear down. So I'm just gonna go into people screen test and just nick this, and then we'll just remove all this placeholder. And like I mentioned in my previous video, there is a better way of doing this, but the reason why we're just doing this a manual way is to get you into the habit of just literally typing this out and working with it more. So what we want to do now is actually type a test to see if the correct information is shown when the item is tapped on. So let's just type this out now. So let's just make sure that our test file actually, runs properly. So let's just run this test and see what happens. Cool, and you'll see that our test failed, which is what we wanted. Okay, sweet. So similar to what we did before, we need to give our details view a mock similar to our people view based on a launch argument. But we actually have a bit of an issue here. I don't know if you've clocked this. Right now, our launch argument here, networking success, is too generic. So we can't actually specify if we want the detail screen to fail and pass, or if we want the people screen to fail and pass as well. So we're actually going to need to refactor our UI test to allow someone to essentially choose and dictate whether they want the people screen and or the detail screen to fail. So in order to do that, the first thing we're going to do is on our launch environment for our people UI tests, we're actually going to change this to now be dash people dash networking success. And on our people screen success one, we're also going to change that to be dash people dash networking success. So because we've updated this launch environment here, we're going to now need to update our UI testing helper. So let's go into our UI testing helper and let's just change this to be dash people networking success, like so. So is networking successful is still too generic. It doesn't say specifically which networking is successful. So let's actually refactor this compute property. So if you just double click on it, and if you just go to refactor and then rename, you should see that you get the option to now refactor this within your project. So we're going to change this to is people networking successful, like so. Sweet. So to make sure that this is all right, now I fully expect the details UI test to fail, but these two tests here should not fail. So on our unit testing, panel here, let's actually hit to run tests on all of them, just to make sure that our tests are still passing for our people. Cool. And you'll see that our tests still pass, so that's working fine. So now what we can do is in our detail UI test, we can just simply say here that I want the people networking success to be 1. So I want the people screen to successfully load, which is fine. And then after here, we can now specify a new key called dash details networking success. And we can set this to 1. So what we're saying here is that we actually want the detail screen to also be successful as well. So within our UI testing helper, we need to actually access this launch environment and use it within our details view for our, dependency injection and in our initializer. So let's just go into our UI testing helper and then let's just copy this. And then we're going to rename this to is details networking successful, and then change this to details like so. Cool. So if we go into our details view, cool. So inside of our detail view, if we scroll all the way to the top here, you'll actually notice that we have a user ID. So when you're working with structs, they actually automatically. So when you're working with structs, they actually automatically, create an initializer for you. But what we want to do this time is we actually want to use our own custom initializer. So there's two ways of doing this. You can either type this out manually yourself, or alternatively, what you can do is actually hold down Command on your keyboard, click on the struct, and there's an option called Generate Member-Wise Initializer. So if you click on that, it'll actually create an initializer for you. So let's just move our initializer underneath our properties, since that's where I just prefer to put them. And now, similar to what we did to our PeopleView model, we actually don't want to initialize our DetailView model, on the same line. We want to actually initialize it within our initializer. So we're going to say DetailView model, like so. And then within this initializer, we're going to use our macro processors again. So we're going to say if debug, else, and then end if. And then within our else, we're going to say underscore view model, and then state object. And the wrap value here is just going to be the default detail view model. And then within the if debug here, we're going to say if UI testing helper dot is unit testing. So UI testing, else. So within the else, we're just going to say underscore VM is equal to state object again, like so. Yep, cool. And then within this if block here, what we're going to say here is we're going to now create our mock based on that property we just created within our UI testing helper. So we're going to say let mock, and then we need to specify the protocol so we can accept different types. So we're going to say networking manager impl. And then within here, we're going to say UI testing helper dot is details networking successful. And if it is successful, we're going to use our networking manager user details response success mock, like so. And then in our other one, we're going to say networking manager user details failure mock, like so. And then we just need to set that within our view model. So we're going to say underscore view model is equal to state object, and then detail view model. And then this is where we're now going to use our dependency injection. So in our networking manager, we're going to inject our mock in to simulate what it is that we want. Cool. So now we have that set up within our detail view. So now we have all of that set up, we're actually now ready to actually write our first, UI test. So in our first UI test, what we essentially need to do is we need to simulate someone actually tapping on an item and then going into the details screen like this. Now we're actually able to do this with our UI test by using a function called tap, which allows us to literally simulate tapping on items. So let's go into our test again for our detail UI test. And within this test here, let's actually just first of all just grab our grid and make sure that it's on the screen. So I'm going to say let grid is equal to app.overElements, and we're going to get our people grid, and then within our after that we're going to say xct assert true, and we're going to make sure that the grid exists on the screen, but we're going to wait for 5 seconds. Cool. So after we get our grid, what we're going to do is we're going to get our, items within the lazy V grid using our predicate that we specified before in our previous video. So we're going to say let predicate, and then ns predicate, And then within here, we're going to say identifier contains item underscore like so. Cool. And then we just want to get the first item within our grid. So I'm just going to say grid item. And then we're just going to say grid. We'll grid items. And then we're going to say grid dot containing predicate. So it's going to find all the buttons that have this item ID within their accessibility identifier. And then after that, we're just going to say grid items and then get the first element, so the first one here. And then we're going to say dot tap, so tap on it for us. So now when it does that, it will actually tap, it will find the item, tap on it and navigate to that screen. So just to test this out, let's just run our test. And you'll see that our test is failing. And the reason why it's failing is because I've done a typo in here. So this should actually be identifier. So identifier, like so. So now let's run that again with the correct spelling. And you can now see briefly then that it tapped on an item and went to the next screen. So that's something that you want to be very careful, because I just made a mistake of making sure that you spell the correct actual property that you want to do your query on. So now we've got it where if it actually launches the app and it taps on the item, it pushes to the next screen for us. The next thing you want to do is actually write a test to validate that all the information on the screen is actually valid. So if we actually just go into our app and just tap on this person here, you'll see here that we want to validate that the details is on the screen. We want to validate that first name, George, this ID, all this information is what we expect on the screen. So let's actually just test this out now. So I'm just going to literally just type this out and then we'll break it down. So now what we're doing here is we're actually checking on our app on the screen to see if all this information is valid and on the screen whilst you actually tap on it and go to the next screen. Now you might be wondering, why am I using the app directly? And the reason why I'm using the app is because I'm actually able to access everything on the screen at almost like a top level by using the app. So that's why we're using that here. So let's just run this and see what happens. Cool, and you'll see that our test passes, so all the information that we expect is on the screen. So now we have our success working for our details. So we have our success working, but now we need to do the opposite, where we actually do a test for when our request fails. We want to make sure that we actually have our alert on the screen and it shows the correct information. So let's create a new file and we'll call it details failure UI test. Cool. And then as usual, we'll just copy our setup. Cool. And then this time, for our details networking success, we want to set this to 0 because we want this to fail. Cool. So now we need to write a function to actually validate that our test is going to basically mess up. So we want to write a test to make sure that an alert is shown. So let's just go into here and we're just going to write the test name. Cool. Sweet. So within here, we want to do a similar thing where we open up our app and actually tap on the screen. So let's just go into our details UI and then I'm just going to copy the logic that we have here and just paste it like so. Cool. But now what we want to do is after this, we want to get the alerts on the screen and validate that the alert has the correct information that we expect. So let's just say let alert, and then we're just going to say app.alert.firstMatch, and then we're going to validate alert.wait for existence, and then we're going to set a timeout of, let's say 3 seconds. And we're just going to say here there should be an alert visible on the screen, like so. Cool. And then after we finish validating that, we're going to validate that the text on the screen is correct as well. So we're going to XCT assert true, and then we're going to check the static text within the alert. And then if we look at our mock within our details view, so we look at our failure mock, it actually throws an invalid URL error. So the text that we're expecting to see on our screen is the URL isn't valid. So we want to test for that. Let's do that now. And then we just want to check, let's say that this exists, like so. Cool. And then after that, we want to write another XCT assert to basically make sure that there's a button that says retry. Cool. Sweet. So now let's just validate this and see what happens. Cool. And now you'll see that our fail actually test, you'll see that our test actually fails. And the reason why is because we actually just run this again. It actually doesn't say retry, it says okay. So instead, it should be okay. So let's actually just run that again and see what happens. Cool. And now you'll see that it passes. So one thing we can do is we want to simulate that when it actually, fails, that it actually shows the correct placeholders on the screen for the user. So let's just do that now. So we're going to check to see the text. So we're just going to do an XCT assert true, and then we're going to check our app static text, and then we're going to see and make sure that first name exists. And then we're going to do the same for last name and job. So first name, last name, and email. And then I'm just going to put a breakpoint in here so we can see that. Cool. So now one thing you'll realize is we actually have these dashes here. And we also have this like ID where it's like 0. So let's just check for that as well to make sure that that's on the screen. Cool. Now for our dashes, we actually want to use a predicate and make sure that 3 of them are visible on the screen. So what I'm just going to do is just type out a predicate again. So I'm going to say predicate. So what we're going to do here is just write a predicate that basically finds all of these and make sure that there's 3 on the screen. So I'm just going to say here placeholder. We're going to say text placeholder predicate. And then I'm going to change this to label, and then we're going to see if the label contains this dash like so. And then on our app, what the first thing we want to do is before we even create that, we actually want to dismiss this alert. So we're going to say alert dot buttons dot first match dot tap. So tap the OK button. Or actually what we could just do is just say buttons OK and then tap. So tap the OK button to dismiss it. And then on the screen we're going to now execute this. So we're going to say app dot containing app.static text dot containing text placeholder predicate, and we'll just hold this in here placeholder items like so. And then we're going to just simply say in here that we want you to assert free. I'm going to say there should be free placeholder items on the screen, like so. Okay, cool. Sweet. So now let's just carry on with this. So I'm just going to stop this. I'm just going to run this test again and see what happens to see if it passes. Cool, and you'll see that our test actually passes now. So now we're actually able to validate that our OK, alert is on the screen, our OK button gets tapped, and then when this gets dismisses, our placeholder has the 3 label placeholders on the screen. So you can see here that we're actually able to validate, pushing to a screen, making sure the elements that are on the screen are correct and whatnot, and also as well making sure that error gets handled properly with an alert. So in the next video, we're actually going to go a bit more advanced, and we're going to talk about how we can actually validate a form and actually type within text field, so automate input. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd love to hear your feedback in the comment section below. Also as well, if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up, as well as subscribe to the channel and hit notification bells to get updates for whenever I release a new video. That's everything from me. I'll catch you in a bit. Deuces.